Hey, welcome back everybody to my podcast. And today's episode is the last episode of the year, and we're going to make it a special one. It's a highlight episode of the year 2022, where I just remember and look back at the whole year and try to pick out episodes that were different or special in one way or the other. It's impossible to highlight every single episode because every single episode was really fun to me and it was special, but these 5 episodes vary from each other, and I wanted to show the variety of episodes and guests that we have on this podcast. And I wanted to start with episode number 23 with Matteo Zuretti. That was actually my first in-person recording at the NBA Players Association office in New York City. And we talked, or rather Matteo talked about how he deals and his team deals with the players' needs and players' circumstances by under promising and over delivering, the importance of that. So check it out, listen in, and listen also to the full episode if you enjoyed it. Because I've learned from my mistakes early on, especially as like Kazlauskas was correcting every little thing, and also with Messina, there was mistakes that I did that I learned from, and like I was obliged not to make the same mistake again. That's basically it. But I would like to hear if you have made a mistake when you talk about players' trust, and they're waiting for you to fail. Have you gotten yourself into a situation, and you don't have to go into many specifics, but was there a situation where you have felt like I made a mistake and you had to go back and correct it, or did it work itself out automatically?
All the time that I haven't followed through, all the time, and I like to think it didn't happen that often, because I learned where I overpromise and underachieve, or simply underachieve. So I'm always very cautious, and this is what I share with my team. Let's underpromise and overachieve all the time. Let's not tell them we are able to do something we're not able to. Let's not be selfish because we want to take the credit for something we are not able to deliver. Let's instead direct the person to the right resource, because it's not about who takes the credit. It's about solving an issue for a player, helping a player figuring out the situation. Doesn't matter where that come from. I go back to the NBA, abundance of resources. Can the league office do something for these guys? We are the ones who say, you should talk to the league about this. Did you check that? They're doing an amazing job into this. You should talk to the international team, to Kimba Hooney. We should have a podcast about her one day. She's a phenomenal figure that really made even my job possible. Or you should talk to player marketing group at the NBA or player development group, because they can do this better. Immigration. There is this person that is phenomenal resource for the guys. Travis Murphy worked for the league. We have very big collaboration with him, right? So it's not about who takes the credit. Who cares? It's about fixing the issue. So to me, the problem and the mistake is always where you're not able to follow through on a promise you've made. And
I hope you enjoyed this little highlight of episode number 23 with Matteo Zuretti. If you did so, go check out the full episode. Meanwhile, in our countdown of 2022, we're going to move to place number 4, where I put Andrej Lemanis. Andrej impresses me as a person, first of all, and I was always curious of how he is able to coach his teams without losing authority, while being authentic, while coaching without an ego. So in this little highlight, he talks about how he empowers the players without making it look like the prisoners are running the asylum. That was the quote he used. And I thought it was very helpful for coaches who are young, up and coming, and sometimes go into ways of not being themselves. So here he talks about how important it is to be yourself. Please go check it out. This is a highlight from episode number 28 with Andrej Lemanis. Ego aside as a coach, and not to be overbearing, overbracing, and letting the players be. How do you approach, and how do you feel that you can be still your authentic and your own self while coaching without being stepped on? Because I think that's the biggest approach, biggest fear, I think, of young coaches, especially, where you have to put your ego aside and not to be a control freak and you're trying to project the nice side of you, right? So it kind of gets responded back to you, and it's kind of a give and take. But it's like one bad apple can ruin the whole deal. So I'm wondering how you implement this egoless coaching, and how do you deal when players are trying to test you and overstep the line? Because there's certainly without mentioning names, I don't like to mention names on my podcast, but when there's players that approach and try to step the line, how do you deal with that?
How long do we have on the podcast? This is a lifelong journey, with lots of learnings and mistakes along the way, and continual learning. And it's maybe I'll jump forward to one of the things in the third or fourth quarter, which is about continual questions you ask yourself, or growth or whatever. And the thing that I keep saying now is, the player, like, I keep getting older, but the players keep staying the same age. So, how do I continue to keep that, relationship with them? And am I still relevant? But in terms of building, so again, this is a long answer. So if you get bored, or think your listeners are going to get bored, please interject and put me in a different direction. But so again, in terms of my journey, I started my first professional head coaching job, and as is normally the case when you get a head coaching opportunity, you take over a team that's struggling. It's rare that the team that wins the championships fires the coach and brings in someone as a first-year head coach, right? And so you're going to take a team that's struggling. I walked into a tough situation, and we were bad. And in my first year, we were on a 10-game losing streak. Thankfully, I had a good owner. Most owners would have fired me. And of course, in that, you're getting young coach, you're getting lots of advice, and everybody's giving you stuff. And again, I played for Brian Goorjian, and he's a pretty demanding coach, and he's the most winningest coach in the Australian league. And people were always, oh, Brian would do it like this, and Brian would do it like that. And then I started trying to be harder, and I'd yell at people, and I found over time, like in the reviews at the end of the year, that the players, the feedback that I got from the players was that they weren't happy, they didn't like the way I was coming across, and that the relationship just wasn't there. And as I thought about myself, it's like, it's not who I am. That's not me. I'm false when I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to be somebody I'm not. And so my first bit of advice is, like, regardless of what I say, what anybody else says, you have to be yourself. Like, your personality is your personality. If you are a screamer and yeller, be a screamer and yeller. If you're not a screamer and yeller, don't be a screamer and yeller. Like, obviously somewhere in there you find the bits, you got to mold a little bit this way, a little bit that way, depending on the situation, the personnel. But be who you are, because the players players know when you're genuine, and when you're, like, they sense when you're faking stuff, and that's when they take advantage or you lose the trust. That's the biggest thing, I think, the trust, if you're not who you are. Then again, through my journey over time, and there's sport over here, AFL football, which is a very big sport in Australia, and they've gone down for many years now, this whole idea of like this team values and team building. And my assistant coach had a connection there, and we started down that path. And to this point, we'd often had people come in from business about, you have to think like this and you have to think like that, and there's above the line thinking and below the line thinking and all those sorts of things. And none of it had really resonated with me, because there's always somebody telling us how it should be. You have to do it like this. And I was like, well, why do we have to do it like that? Like, why is that going to work for us? And then we got a guy in from the AFL, we call it team building side of the game. And I guess the penny drop moment for me was when he went around the room. He's like, how many games of experience do you have? And someone, I've had 50 games, and I've had 200 games. And at that stage, we had a player on that team who played the most ever games in the Australian NBL. Like, Tony Rollinson, he played like 620 games. And so he finishes all that, and he's like, okay, so there's like, okay, sorry, I missed a bit. At the start of that, there was a question from one of our players, like, because, he opens up, he gives his spiel, and he says, has anyone got any questions? The player puts his hand up and says, yeah, why are you here? You got leading teams on your shirt. are you here to help us pick a captain, or what, what's the day about? And then he goes around, asks the games experience, and he said, okay, so there's like 2,500 games of experience in this room, and you guys want me to tell you how to run your team? No wonder you guys can't win anything. And for me, that was the penny drop moment to say, okay, this guy's different. Like, there's something here that's different. And that's where sort of we started to establish the whole process of player-driven team values. And so then, we go through a process of discussing as a team, what do we stand for? How do we want to be seen? What values do we want to expose? What do we all commit to? And because the players have been part of the process, what it then gives you is a framework that you can sort of keep coming back to and utilize to say, well, as a team, and you were part of this discussion, as a team, we said that, we wanted to move the ball and so I'm just going back to what we agreed to as a group. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Benis, for taking that shot. I'm not saying you're a bad guy, but as a team, we agreed that that's not the best way for us to play. So you just can keep coming back. You can hold people to account in a different way to the values of the group. And I find that very powerful. And so I guess I've really grown down that path over time. And it's when I present it, there's often the question is, does it feel like the inmates are running the asylum, right? That's often the question that I get. And my answer is, I actually feel that I have a lot more control by giving up control. And there's winning, there's by empowering the players to communicate, to take ownership, things get taken care of. Like, it doesn't always have to be the head coach taking care of things. And, there's classic examples of teams that won a championship, and, you're sitting around afterwards having a drink, and some stories start to come out of stuff that I didn't even know. But, someone on the team, or the captain took care of it, or someone else took care of it, or an assistant coach took care of it before it got to be a problem. And so I actually feel like I've got a lot more control by giving
And that was Coach Lemanis talking about authentic coaching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go check out episode number 28. Now we're moving on to highlight number 3. And that's from our very recent episode, number 35, with Coach David Blatt. And in this little highlight from our conversation, he talks about the importance of cultural competency. And he does a very good job of describing the importance of realizing that there are differences in culture, and that as a coach, you have to be able to adjust after recognizing them. And he gave some really cool examples, especially from his time in Israel, in terms of holidays and adjusting to that. So go check it out and let me know what you thought about it. Is there a time or a place or a team, a certain year where of realization? Because I've had a realization in the past where, you go from one level to another, and then you just have like an epiphany where it's just like, oh, this is a different level basketball, different kind of basketball. Is that like lessons left and right that I have absorbed? And that kind of opened my mind to of like the possibilities of how basketball can be played, of how basketball evolves in a different way. There's not one way of doing things. Was there a moment or a time, or maybe a country for that matter, that opened up your eyes a little bit more, even more, just to have like a wider horizon and made you understand that there's a lot more that you didn't know up until that point?
Well, the great John Wooden, the historical and perhaps the most famous college basketball coach in the history of American sports, head coach of UCLA, of course. He once said, it's what you learn after you know everything that counts. And I've tried to adopt that throughout the course of my career. And every place that I've gone, and every team that I've coached, and every management that I've worked with, and every staff that I've either hired or become part of, they all have different ideas. They all have different ways of doing things. And I think it's so important, as someone like me who's worked in many different countries, in many different environments, that you recognize the critical nature of cultural competency. being able to know where you're coming from and to bring that to the table, but also being open-minded enough to understand where you are coming to or where you are going to, and accepting that there are differences and that there are different ways of doing things. And there is the importance to be open-minded and to being tolerant of those things. Not to think that you have your way and that's the only way. It doesn't generally get you very far. So I always try to make it a point to understand the environment that I was in, to learn some of the language of the place that I was living in, to embrace the cultural differences of those places, to recognize the different personalities that perhaps already were in place when I arrived there, and to make that work in such a fashion that I would grow as a person. I would help those people or those individuals that I was working with to grow also, and to make that a point of emphasis, whether it be through communication, whether it be through just understanding, whether it be through a sincere desire to recognize one another, accept one another, be patient with one another on a level that went beyond whether you feed the post more in this place or you shoot the ball with this particular technique and that pace. That stuff is secondary, and I think that was probably one of the very biggest keys to my coaching success and coaching career in different.
Yes, adaptability and embracing was the word that I think that I also was thinking of. And I had this topic later on in communication, but let's talk about that a little bit, because there's one thing that I wanted to add from my side, because I know that once you learn also more languages, speaking the tongue of a different culture makes you think a different way as well. It helps you. It rewires your brain. I don't know the anatomical or the biological, significance of it, but it rewires your brain in certain ways, and it helps you to think and understand people in a different way, in a different light. And there's, like you said, there's not one way of doing things. You have to have these, pick up certain things from them by learning their language, by learning how they think. Because when you start expressing, you start learning and listening of what they say, how they say it, it triggers a different aha moment in you where you're like, oh, okay, that's where he's coming from, from in regards of like thought process. But in those situations when you were in all this, I was looking at the countries, US, Turkey, Russia, Greece, Italy. Am I missing something?
USA, Canada.
Yeah, USA, Canada. Yeah.
Did you say Israel?
Yeah, Israel, of course, yes. Yeah, that's an obvious aha moment there. Let's call it brain fart. But what cultural cues did you specifically look for in those countries that you coached, that maybe by learning the language or by embracing certain things, were there certain cues that stood out to you the most, whether it was body language, whether it was intonation of a certain sentence structure that kind of helped you understand them a little bit better?
Sure. Many, almost too many to mention. I'll give you some small examples in Israel. For example, you have to understand that there are many holidays there, some which are more of a serious nature, some which are more of a celebratory nature. You have to be willing and ready to adapt your practice schedule, even your game schedule, certainly your load schedule, according to those holidays. Very much the same thing in Turkey. There are periods of time where certain players may be fasting throughout the course of the day and eat only at night. And you better be aware of that in order to set up your practice schedule and your load schedule in such a way that allows these guys to make it through that period of time. Certainly Russia, from a linguistic standpoint, was very challenging, but it's not only the language that's different, it's also the mentality that is so very different, and you have to recognize that and be respectful of that in such a way that allows you to communicate with people effectively and efficiently and in the proper manner. So, when I come into the NBA, it was a whole different world. I'm American born, but I spent most of my time in Europe. When I came back after 36 years to the United States, it was a whole different world for me. It was my native tongue, and these were people that I had grown up with. But the world of basketball in the United States, and certainly in the NBA, had changed drastically for all of us. The world has changed drastically. Yes. The internet and the media and the all of the different influences and influencers, they've changed the nature of sport in general. And you working with younger people who are maybe a lot more part of that world than you yourself are, have to be aware of that, have to understand the impact of those things, have to be cognizant of what motivates these guys, have to be aware of outside influences that may impact your team or your players or your interpersonal relationships. These are things that demand a kind of again, cultural competency or a kind of maturity or a kind of tolerance that really challenges you.
I hope you enjoyed this highlight of my podcast with Coach David Blatt. It was episode number 35. If you did so, go check it out. It was very enriching for all the coaches that are young or old. Lots of things still to learn. And moving on to the next one is place number 2. And that's Maurizio Gherardini from episode number 36. And in this clip, this little highlight, he talks about the importance of communicating with the head coach throughout the season. A constant communication, especially plenty examples he gave with Coach Željko Obradović of how many discussions they had and how many different situations they thought through. Then he also compared when he worked with Coach D'Antoni and Coach David Blatt as well. So please go check it out. And if you did enjoy it, go check out episode number 36.
I would be mentioning in our chat over and over certain concepts that I think are at the base of trying to be successful or having an extra opportunity to succeed. And I already told you about curiosity. I already told you about challenge. Another thing is communication. So I think you're looking to coaches in first place, understanding what type of communication you can generate, what type of communication you can develop in the interest of your own club. It's not a personal interest. And I think the type of communication that you establish with your own coach is at the base of everything. And I would give you the example of someone like Željko Obradović. At the end of the day, we worked together almost 10 years, and is the greatest coach in international basketball. And there was not one day that it started without an opportunity to communicate, without me stopping by his office or him coming to my office and talk about something, evaluate something. That was, or me going to the practice site and sit down, and he would always find a timeout to share. So the sharing part is critical in order to be successful. And that's what you're probably trying to figure out when you approach or evaluate a new coach. It's not only how he thinks in terms of X and O's, but also how he can communicate, how you feel like you can relate to him. Then, of course, you have other needs, and the needs are in line with your specifically with your with the reality that you are managing. So the size of your budget, the type of players that you have under contract, what the coach eventually thinks in terms of how he wants to play the game, if that you think it fits your picture, how your thinking evolves through the next 1, 2, 3 seasons, if that goes in line with the coach's thinking. Quite frankly, I try to follow the coaches the same way I follow the players. I mean, I used to, because now I'm let's say I'm in a different position, but I always kind of follow them through their careers the same way that I follow the players. I always like to follow their media statements, how they think, how they react, or sometimes I even went to coach's clinic, because again, another concept, there is always something that you can learn every day from every angle in any situation of this business, whether it's technical stuff or marketing or ticketing or social media. So I even, I like to go and listen to coaches or to follow them on their, let's say, video stuff, just to get a feel of the coaches. I can share a story when we selected to go for Obradovic, and the CEO of our company in Treviso, Benetton, said he looks like he looks like a very, very aggressive, strange kind, because I don't know him. I need to have a feeling. I said, hey, let's go. Come with me. We're going to go and watch a game of him. I think it was, they were playing a game in Paris. So we flew to Paris, and we tried to hide somewhere in the gym, just to give my CEO the opportunity to watch the coach in action. And of course, coach didn't know that we were going. It was a secret mission of scouting. And as soon as the game was over, the CEO said, "No, he's our guy. I like him. I like how he relates with players. I like her. Now let's try to connect and try to finalize the deal." And I remember, I can't remember where, but we connected, and at the end of a great conversation, the guy asked me, so Željko asked me, "Are you, where are we? Are you okay with everything we discussed?" I said, "Željko, if you're okay, you are our coach." And he goes, "I'm okay. Let's shake hands." And we shook hands, and the CEO who attended the dinner said, "But are we going to sign anything?" And Željko looked at him and said, "Hey, I gave Maurizio my hand. What else do you want to sign?" And then we ended up signing the contract, after he got to Treviso for, with the start of the season. But there was no need to sign, because he had shaken my hand, and that was the deal. So again, you look for you not only look for X and O's, you look for for what you think is the relationship you can establish, the understanding by the coach of the picture you're in, and the goals of your organization and the level of your organization, because coach needs to be comfortable with the picture that is going to end up eventually working in, and that is very, very, very important.
So communication is just right down my alley, as the listeners know. But in that regard, when you are constantly communicating, constantly debating, arguing, just exchanging information, opinions on a daily basis, how many times is there, or like, there's moments where you have to agree to disagree, right? It's not always going to match. What are the situations or the points that you leave to the coach, and what are the situations that you tell the coach to leave it up to you, where there's a clear separation of decision-making power?
Well, I'm using a term that has been used in many, let's say, EuroLeague discussions lately, but no, I think you have to hope, you have to wish to go by consensus, in the sense that because of what I just told you, if you made a good analysis, your way of thinking should be fairly similar, in the sense that the two minds should be evaluating the picture in a very similar way. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, the decision cannot be seen from two different angles. I think that from my side, I need to underline the priority of respecting numbers. So respecting the budget is a priority. Respecting, how much we can invest in any sort of operation is a priority. And on the other side, the technical side, of course, is coach's field. Is his kingdom. So I think it's important that if the budget is not affected, coach feels like he has more of a decision-making, let's say, power, because of course he says, okay, I stay within this. This is my, I want to go for this player instead of this other player. I like the fact that if to have a coach that anyway, even knowing this sort of, let's call it decision-making power, if within your box, of your budget box, gives you the opportunity to understand your thinking process. So it's not one of those situations where I am the coach, forget about your opinion. I am the coach. I decide this. If this is the approach, then let's say the path together can be a struggling one. Again, I used the example of Obradović before. Every decision was always discussed, shared, and he would always listen to my point of view. But again, let's say he was going his way, or sometimes he would say, hey, you know what? You are right. Let's take this approach. I mean, the sharing, communication and sharing. The sharing was always at the base of every decision. Then, of course, I felt I was always a part of this decision-making process, and I think that's what you have to feel, to be part of this decision-making process, understanding that if within your budget limitation, and he is the coach, so he needs to put together the car that he needs to drive afterwards. So he is your pilot, he's your driver. So you cannot put him in a situation that he doesn't feel comfortable with the car that is put together. That is the philosophical, let's say, approach. So I think that has changed through the years, going back 40 years ago. 40 years ago, it was more the approach of, hey, we are the club, we put together this team and you coach it. Now it's different. Coach has to, I like the idea of coaches knowing the numbers, knowing the budgets, understanding what we can do and what we cannot do. And because again, today is it's a different approach, and they need to understand the issues that we have to solve in order to manage the situation at best, so
it all both comes down back to communication, because of the juggling back and forth. It leads to clarity, right? It's like a filter. You continuously filter information and filter opinion until it's so clear that you both have no choice but to agree on a certain thing, or completely throw it away and both agree to just shelve.
That's the most important thing. I mean, I can recall hours and hours with every coach I had. Hours, I mean, put together, not at once, but through. I remember when I had a clinic in Vegas for the American Coaches Association, and 1 year, and I talked about the topic of communication and sharing with the coaches. And I was telling them, hey, I had Mike D'Antoni for 4 years as a coach. And Mike will, at the end of the day, will probably be remembered as one of the coaches who changed the game with his way of playing it, But Mike, when he started our career out of Milano with us in Treviso, was a struggling coach coming out of a Milan job with, let's say, with still doubts if he could turn into a successful coach. And he had afterwards an amazing NBA career. But I told him that those years that I spent together with him, every morning, he was a very methodical person. He would stop by, Treviso, as you know, is a very, very small place. He would stop by the train station, buy the only copy of USA Today, get to one bar place where, he would get there and start doing his crossword puzzle. I would come from home. He would have his cappuccino. I would have my espresso. And we would start talking basketball. And that was the start of our day. And every day, because that was the need of sharing. Obradovic had different habits, at least in Treviso. Obradovic, we went out after practice at night to a place in front of the arena, and we had French fries, big olives, and beer, and talk basketball for 2-3 hours, to the point that my wife was calling and say, hey, where are you? Because you disappeared. No, we're here in front of the gym just talking basketball. And with David, we had long talks. I mean, talking, sharing, discussing basketball is fundamental for all the decision that you have to make, and for you to manage a basketball club.
Yeah, I think the key component on that is to be able to have the ability to be rational and not to be afraid to change your opinion on things, to be a flip-flopper to an extent, but not to be married to an idea, but be open to having your opinion changed by somebody else, and not be stubborn on something that you think and you believe in, but you don't allow any other arguments to change your mind. I think it's a key component on finding the right solution.
I think it's very important that a coach doesn't get surrounded by yes men, but it's also important that a GM doesn't have a relationship where he doesn't get, a true feedback. I mean, he needs to know what you think, and I need to know what he thinks. If we all tell each other what each other would like to hear, then you are on the wrong path. You are on the wrong path, and this is, I think, one of the most sensitive points, because in today's business, with the unpredictability of the business, unless you really are comfortable with your own success and who you are as a coach, a lot of times it happens that you feel it, or you see. We go back to scouting coaches, like you were mentioning before. You see and you feel that sometimes you like in any other situation in life, you get the answers that they think is the nicest answer for you to hear. But then you need to know if that is the person that you're looking for. I mean, you want to have whoever is around you telling you what he thinks in the most honest way, because again, sharing it means also to have a honest comparison of opinions. And as you said, sometimes you can agree, sometimes you disagree, but that's how you grow. You cannot grow with fake opinions, because
So
it
that was the
doesn't lead
highlight
you
of
anywhere.
Maurizio Gherardini's podcast with me, episode number 36. If you enjoyed this little highlight, go check it out. We talked a lot more about other topics that are interesting, not only for executives, but also for coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches alike. And moving on to the first spot is obviously the biggest highlight for me of the year was early in the year with Coach Sarunas Jasikevicius, episode number 20. And this episode was the most popular episode on YouTube for me. It got over 19,000 views. And this little highlight that we added here is it's a little bit longer. We talked a lot about different topics and mostly about assistant coaches and the importance of the assistant coaches to him in the situations where he consults them the most, not only in practices, but during games, timeouts, end of games. Then we went on to talk about when to control a team, when to let go the team, and a lot of different things along the way. This is just a small highlight compared to how enriching the podcast episode was with him. If you enjoyed this highlight, you surely will enjoy the full episode. And I hope you enjoyed this episode in full, this highlights of my year in the podcast world. It was a very special year for me. And I hope to see you in the new year again, 2023. And yeah, it's going to be even bigger, faster, and stronger. Thanks for being here. Bye. So what's one of the more important questions you ask yourself after practices? Like, is there something that you always like have a checklist of something like, did we get better? Did we do something? Did we accomplish something today? Is there something you pay attention to after practice that you want to double check yourself maybe?
It's constant communication with your assistant. It's constant analyzing. We're talking things like, okay, during the preseason, did we achieve what we wanted? Did we do this? Okay, this drill went terrible. Tomorrow, starting with that drill. Insistence. We didn't get the job done. Now we got to try to get the job done tomorrow. Whereas during the season, there's so many games and practices. Maybe for some players, the practice will not be important. If the guy is struggling, you're clearly watching him. Is he putting in the work? Is he there? Or he's just floating through the practice and he's not interested, and that's most likely why he's not performing at this point. And so it's constant communication. It's very important, the assistant coaches, because for sure as a head coach, you don't see everything. It's not even close. But communication. You want everybody to succeed. You want everybody to feel important. But if you're not playing during the game, most likely you need to put in the work. So in that sense, you analyzing with assistants. They give you information. This player coming in, this player doing extra work. Okay, you see the player working. Most likely he will come out of the slump. Most likely he will get better. Usually things will get better if you do things the right way. So it's also a message for you. Okay, don't give up on this player too quickly. Give him more chances. Let him be. But it's very important in so many games right now. I mean, we have 12, 13 players. It's really important that everybody is ready to play. Everybody feels important. Everybody feels like part of the team. So, yeah.
Reflect and communicate with your assistants, just to have like everything covered, all the bases covered. You don't want to miss anything. And that's why during practice, all eyes have to be there. They have to be focused during practices and not miss any little detail. It can't be in their own heads with anything else.
I mean, there's no question. Assistants. I mean, why to have assistants if you're never gonna, if you're never gonna rely on them? A lot of coaches don't like assistants. I like opinions a lot. I encourage opinion a lot of times. Probably now I'm 7 years, something like this. Head coach is. We never did something major. I'm talking about signing players, deciding on tactics before the game, where I say, listen, man, I'm the head coach. This is going to be done like this. No way. I think they will not enjoy it, and me, why I need assistance if I'm just going to make my own decision. No, so we talk it out, everything, signing the players. If there was a lot of times when out of 6, my opinion is the only one. So you're really opening your eyes. Okay, these 5 guys, they cannot be so stupid, So what am I not seeing? And then again, you encourage communication. You encourage you provocate one another to give information, to give very honest information. And probably if out of 6 I am the only one, probably I'm the only one who's wrong.
Yeah, it's being honest to yourself as well in those moments.
Yeah.
Talking about assistance, and that's a good segue to the game now that we're still in the second quarter, but we're going from practice to game. When you talk about assistants, what's the most common questions or information you're looking for during a game from your assistants? What's the feedback you're asking for maybe before a timeout, whenever you go into the huddle? Is there certain things you ask them or you wait for them to tell you?
Again, some guys are responsible for offense, some guys are responsible for defense. It could be information. Maybe I want to run a specific play, but I need to know what was the last time the defense against this player, so I get to choose my offense better. Yeah, I mean, whatever stuff demands at this point, you're struggling offensively, and all of a sudden you just say, okay, listen, what was our best lineup, more or less, and you're sitting surrounded by the guys. What was our best lineup that we were flowing better offensively? Okay, we did good when more or less we're talking about,
Yeah.
And you start again, you take information, but you still need to make your own decisions. You know what I mean? So like at halftime, obviously it's a major time, and you assess the game. Okay, we're doing good offensively, we're doing bad defensively. Okay, let's put our best defensive lineup. Well, more or less, what was it? For example, last game against Madrid, we played and still Kalatis and Higgins are not in the best shape, So I sit down, I remember, okay, who we finishing as a point guard? Like Kalatis, Jokubaitis, Laprovitola. No, Laprovitola is really good today. Okay, we finished the game with Laprovitola. So you decide that, but more or less, you try to decide all together still as much as possible. Maybe something like, and believe me, there's games when you turn to the bench, and as a head coach, you telling your assistants, listen, man, I just don't know who the hell I'm putting on the court right now. But in 90 games, everybody's struggling. It could be games like this.
Yeah.
Okay, who the hell I'm playing with today? Who's ready?
Is there such thing as information overload, or is there no such thing? Because there's like a lot of information you have to absorb and process, but there's a limit.
Sometimes it could be, but usually I like information. I like information a lot. For me, if I want to make mistake in one end, it would be because of information overload. I like basketball, man. I like talking about basketball, like thinking, pam, pam, pam. Okay, no, I don't like this idea, what you're just saying, this information that you're giving me. Okay, I don't like that information. Okay, I'm taking that. You know what I mean?
You're filtering it out. You trust yourself to filter out the information. Yeah.
Well, at the end, don't forget, I'm the most responsible. All the snipers will be after me after the game. When we lose. So,
but it's key, because I've seen it also happen. I obviously have a lot of people I know also in this business, but also when there is you kind of, as a head coach, I feel like you have to also tell your assistants to be honest and not to tell them what you want to hear, but you want to hear their honest and true opinion that what they feel, because otherwise everybody's drowning together and nobody's saying what you really need to hear.
No, exactly. But this is the process of the trust. I think it's our second year in Barcelona, and obviously it's very easy for me to deal with Lithuanians because they've been so long, and you can tell that every month that passing, the Spanish assistants are more confident just to tell you whatever. But I also don't think it's right or wrong. I mean, for example, I know head coaches will tell some assistants, man, just don't bust my balls, man. Don't tell me too much, and we're good. Yeah. We're good. I mean, maybe that's what's working for them.
Yeah.
So, some guys like to keep it simple, like as simple as possible. So
let me ask you this: like I'm a communication geek and freak, and people know that know me, but there's what I think for effective communication is also important to feel, and before you say something, make sure that the other person interprets the words correctly. So whenever I say something, I want to make sure that the person knows where I'm coming from, and I want to know what I'm trying to think what other person may be thinking. So to transfer this to the game, how often do you think what the other coach may be thinking or what he's thinking next, and how do you prepare for those situations? Like, is there a moment, a specific moment where, like, after timeouts, you feel like, what is this coach is going to think? What is he going to do? Or do you just focus on yourself more than anything else?
You're talking about the game situations against the opponent coach?
Yeah. What if you're thinking of what the opponent coach is thinking or not, or if you make a situation? A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I'm thinking a lot. Yeah, I'm thinking what he's going to come out with, what to expect, what just happened. And I'm thinking, and you also, in experience-wise, especially in EuroLeague a little bit close circle as far as the coaches go. So we already play against each other for a long time. So most of the coaches, you already, like, I get to know them pretty good right now because it's been 7 or 8 years. I bet I get to know them. I know this guy, he will not change anything. So we know exactly. I know this guy will for sure try to change something, so we have to counter, for sure. That's
an aspect of scouting and preparation as well, I assume. I mean, you like experience, obviously, but also you kind of know, but you also want to know how he could surprise you or not surprise you, just preparing for that moment.
Exactly. No, I mean, I understand that. I understand exactly how a lot of the coaches do. I'm saying this guy can come out with something right now, can come out with and put a zone, or he's done it in the last, 3 or 4 games that we watched the team play. He's done this. So, hey, just a sentence there, mainly for the point guard. Be ready. Maybe there could be a trap, something. This guy, you don't even tell the player. So this guy will not do anything. He just wants to be solid all the time.
Yeah.
Again, no right or wrong at all, I believe.
Yeah. Finding the right words is often a very important, but how do you measure importance of finding the right words, what to say? And sometimes situation will dictate of what you have to say versus X's and O's. What's the value between the two in your estimation?
Timeouts and everything in international basketball is so they're so like 1 minute. They have really everything happening. I don't have time to really be there. Usually I'm like a machine gun over there. Do this, bam, bam. And if you give time, you want to give ATO, but it's really, with me, it's really very little amount of sugarcoating and try to go around. Now, if it's halftime, if I get a dead ball and I want to say something to the players, then probably I will go a little bit more calm and everything. But in timeout, it's like, bam, 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 bam. Listen, they are getting us with this right now. We got to solve it. You're not there. You're not there. You got to do this. But, then maybe a quick timeout play or something like this. But you also got to feel the player a little bit. In this case, for me, was easier because, I was a player myself, so I know exactly what they're going through. I think it helps you when you played, especially at this level. And sometimes, sometimes your patience is not there. Maybe you're doing the wrong, and sometimes you know exactly how the player is feeling, and you go and you do sugarcoat a little bit the situation without being fake. But I think players probably don't like it too much, honestly, but usually deep inside they respect. And this is what you're trying to achieve the most is respect, at least me.
Yeah. I mean, you want to be heard whenever you talk, but you also want to be true. So let me give you an example of something that I experienced, and I mentioned it before on another episode. But I was on a car wash one time, and when you go drive the car into the car wash and you put the car on the belt, and then the belt is going to drag you through the car wash, your car is going to get washed, and you have to let go of the wheel. You have to put it in a neutral and trust that the belt is going to drag you through it, and you're going to come out safe on the other end. I struggled. I'm a control freak in many aspects, and I struggle to let go, but you have to trust it. So my question to you is, during the games, when do you feel like you can control and you have to control the game? When is it that you have to let go of the guys and trust them to make the right decisions?
Usually second part of the season, I let it go a lot. I let it go a lot. Second part of the season, I think I'm really, really like from the moment we start working on details, which is usually like first games, and you're really pushing. I think I'm stopping the practices a lot in the first part of the season, everything. And second part of the season, you sort of like, even offensively, I like to make decisions. They already know at this point what is a good shot, what is a bad shot. They're also tired of hearing your voice for probably 6 months that already you've been doing it. And you need to trust your process that for the first 6 months, you really did a job. You have a lot of videos and everything. And now we're going into the last part of the season where the freshness is extremely important. And if they don't know at this point, then you kind of a little bit disappointed with yourself already, you know, but it worked. It worked. Practices become less and less. My voice is becoming less and less. I try to maybe some days, even if we have just a stadium practice, not even say a word, you know, just because they're already tired of me.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, you know.
So let's move on to the coaching career a little bit. I have a couple points that I wanted to trigger on, or to double click on rather. But you already talked a little bit about the transition, because the transition period from player to assistant coach, from assistant coach to head coach. You mentioned the first speech you had to give that when you became the head coach. It's a challenge. But what do you remember as a first-time head coach during the first full season, the biggest struggles you felt like as a head coach for the first time that you had to you really felt like you were challenged the most on?
Well, first of all, by being the boss first time and not understanding the situation. For example, right? So I was head coach in January. Then I was inherited with a team. It was not my team, you know, and then you have to, in Žalgiris, you have to build over from the players who are up and coming. Obviously, you don't have a lot of money. You cannot compete with the top clubs in the money, but you need to find the players. So at this point, these players are coming, and the first 3 or 4 months, they're in absolute shock about the EuroLeague. They're in absolute shock. They are too slow, whether physically or with their decision making. And you just need time. You just need time. And people say my system is on the complicated side. It could be. I mean, we do try to have a lot of options and everything, but you still try to put the options in at the decent time. You know, you're not going to put 20 different systems and offenses and defenses. So I was struggling to just understand, like, what is the best way, really? Like, do I sign like veteran players that? Anyway, it's very difficult to sign the veteran players because they all demand a lot of money. Everybody wants a sure thing, a veteran, so they are more expensive. Or do we go there? And we always try to give the right balance and everything. But I was struggling to understand when these guys will come about. You know, and you see that in December they started. Okay, so this was the first year. My second year, I was already more calm that in December they come around. Just be patient. Very important that my president who had good communication with me, he's talking a lot. He's seeing the same thing. So, like, again, what we started the podcast was everybody going in the right direction, in the same direction. You know, everybody's present, everybody's interested. It's extremely important. Not just one president coming from the suite. Sometimes, hey man, what's going on here? Why are we losing?
Without having seen a practice. Without having seen a practice.
Exactly. If you come to practice, if you talk to me sometimes, maybe you will understand why the hell we're losing. So the second, the third year, you already see that, you know, December, January, these new players come around. So, and you know that if these players will develop like you're developing them, they will leave in 1 or 2 years. And it happened, you know, with over the 5 years in Žalgiris or something like this. Yeah, so like I was struggling to understand, oh my God, like, did I sign the right players? Did I, you know, it was just inexperience. Again, we're going back, inexperience. I don't know if I'm doing the right job. And then we were losing probably the 4th year. We lost 9 EuroLeague games in a row. And to tell you the truth, when you analyze it and everything, it was not that much panic because we already knew that we are playing good. Our players are developing. I mean, I'm not going to tell you, it was really tough moments to lose 9 in a row and everybody was talking. But from my side, it was already less panic. I mean, even talking with the president, okay, look at this is why we're losing. This is why we're doing this. All these things are a little bit not in our control, injury there and there. Mm-hmm. So again, it's now it's, you already understand a lot of things a little bit better in my case.
But trusting the process, with the experience, it's just
trusting the process. Sure.